I have seen men coughing out their gasped lungs. I have seen the dead in the mud.
Franklin Delano Roosevelt was born into privilege, but history would remember him not for his comfort, but for his courage. Born on January 30th, 1882 in Hyde Park, New York, he was the only child of a wealthy family whose lineage reached back into the earliest chapters of America. Raised in a world of quiet power and private tutors, Roosevelt seemed destined for a life of gentle leadership, polished, polite, and perhaps unremarkable. But fate had other plans. He attended Groton, then Harvard, and later Columbia Law School. Yet it wasn't textbooks or titles that prepared him for the storms he would one day weather. It was personal pain. In 1921, at the age of 39, Franklin Roosevelt was struck by polio. The disease ravaged his body, leaving his legs paralyzed and his future uncertain. For a man once known for his boundless energy and commanding presence, it was a shattering blow. Many believed his political career was finished, but Roosevelt was not a man who surrendered to despair. In the waters of Warm Springs, Georgia, where he sought therapy and solace, he began to rebuild, not just his body, but his sense of purpose. He found strength in the very weakness that had threatened to define him. The struggle made him empathetic. The suffering gave him insight. And the slow climb back from the shadows gave him an unshakable belief that the impossible could be overcome with determination, compassion, and courage. When the Great Depression swept across the nation in 1929, America descended into a kind of national paralysis. Banks failed, farms collapsed, families stood in breadlines. There was fear in every corner of the country. And in that fear, Roosevelt saw something hauntingly familiar. He knew what it meant to be helpless. He knew what it meant to be afraid, but he also knew how to fight back. In 1932, the people placed their trust in him, not because he was perfect, but because he understood their pain. When he stepped forward to take the oath of office on March 4th, 1933, he spoke with the voice of a man who had faced personal catastrophe and returned stronger. His words that day became immortal. The only thing we have to fear is fear itself. They were not just words, they were a promise. Roosevelt's New Deal was not a single policy. It was a declaration of war against despair. He took swift, bold action, stabilizing banks, creating jobs through massive public works programs, establishing Social Security, and giving working people hope that the government was not indifferent to their suffering. He created a government that didn't just govern. It fought for the vulnerable, listened to the unheard, and reached into every corner of the nation. He did all this not from a place of physical strength. He often governed from a wheelchair, hidden from the public eye, but from a place of extraordinary moral clarity. He knew what it meant to be forgotten, underestimated, dismissed, and he made sure the people of America never had to feel that way again. Roosevelt's strength wasn't just in his policies, it was in his presence. His fireside chats brought warmth to homes filled with worry. His calm voice on the radio made families believe, if only for a moment, that things would get better. He offered leadership not as a command from above, but as a hand reaching out from beside. The first years of his presidency were a test of willpower, innovation, and relentless optimism. He restored confidence not by promising miracles, but by proving that progress was possible, step by step, day by day. Franklin Roosevelt had once lost the use of his legs, but he would become the one to lift a nation to its feet. As America slowly rose from the ashes of economic collapse, Franklin Roosevelt remained at the helm, steady, composed, and unrelenting. The New Deal evolved into more than a recovery plan. It became a redefinition of what government could be. To millions, Roosevelt was no longer just the president. He was a symbol of hope in action, proof that government could be a force for good. He pushed boundaries and broke precedents, not for power, but for purpose. When critics called his programs radical, he embraced the label. He believed that in times of crisis, bold experimentation was not a risk, but a responsibility. Under his watch, the Works Progress Administration built bridges, roads, schools, and dams. The Civilian Conservation Corps gave purpose to young men with idle hands and restless spirits. and the Social Security Act of 1935 ensured that America's elderly, vulnerable, and unemployed were not left behind. Roosevelt's vision was not limited to economics. He believed in the dignity of labor, the security of the average citizen, and the promise that democracy could deliver not only freedom, but fairness. His reforms faced fierce opposition from entrenched powers, but he stood firm. "They are unanimous in their hate for me," he once said of the economic elite, "and I welcome their hatred." It wasn't defiance for the sake of pride, it was a declaration that the government's allegiance belonged not to wealth or privilege, but to the people. Yet even as the country began to heal, storm clouds gathered abroad. In Europe, fascism was rising. In Asia, war raged. Roosevelt, a student of history, recognized the danger long before others. He knew that the fight for freedom was no longer confined to American soil. It was becoming a global struggle. When World War II erupted in 1939, Roosevelt walked a fine line. The nation was weary of conflict. Memories of the Great War were still raw. But Roosevelt understood that isolation could not shield a free people from tyranny forever. Quietly, he prepared the nation. Through programs like Lend-Lease, he offered support to the Allies, supplying the tools of war long before America joined the battle. Then came the morning of December 7, 1941, Pearl Harbor. The attack shattered any illusion of distance. The war had come to America's doorstep, and once again, Roosevelt rose to the moment. He addressed Congress with words etched into the soul of the nation, a date which will live in infamy. He asked for a declaration of war not just on Japan, but on aggression, on terror, on the very idea that might makes right. Congress agreed. The world would never be the same. As Commander-in-Chief, Roosevelt faced his greatest trial. He led not from the battlefield, but from the war rooms and radio waves. He balanced military decisions with moral clarity, strategy with empathy. His leadership spanned continents, meeting with Churchill and Stalin, forging uneasy alliances, and crafting a vision for peace even amid carnage. He didn't promise quick victory. He promised sacrifice, unity, and determination. Factories roared to life. Women stepped into roles once denied to them. The nation mobilized not just with weapons, but with purpose. Under his guidance, America became the arsenal of democracy. Yet even as he led the world through its darkest hour, Roosevelt faced battles at home. His health was failing. The toll of years in office and the burdens of leadership had etched themselves into his face, but he refused to slow down. He ran for an unprecedented fourth term, not out of ambition, but out of duty. The people re-elected him again, placing their faith once more in the man who had never turned away from a challenge. Franklin D. Roosevelt understood something few leaders grasp, that true strength lies not in force, but in resolve, not in fearlessness, but in the courage to keep moving forward, especially when fear is everywhere. He had led America out of a depression. He was now leading it through a world war, and still, he looked ahead, not only to victory, but to the peace that must follow. By the spring of 1945, Franklin Delano Roosevelt had given everything he had to the cause of democracy. His strength, his voice, his very body. He traveled to Yalta that year, exhausted and ailing, but still determined to shape the peace that would follow the war. He knew the world was entering a new age, and he believed America had a duty to lead, not through domination, but through cooperation. On April 12, 1945, in Warm Springs, Georgia, Roosevelt passed away quietly while sitting for a portrait. The brush never finished its stroke. The news struck the nation like thunder. For over 12 years, he had been the face of comfort during crisis, of steadiness during war. Many Americans had never known another president. And yet, as the flags lowered and tears fell, his legacy stood tall. He left behind more than victories. He left behind a reimagined nation, one where the government fought for the poor, protected the old, empowered the worker, and stood firm against tyranny. His vision extended beyond borders, laying the groundwork for the United Nations and a world that might one day learn from the scars of conflict. Franklin D. Roosevelt did not cure fear, but he taught a generation how to live through it and how to rise above it. In the end, his greatest triumph was not winning a war or ending a depression. It was giving people the courage to believe again. The past is not forgotten. It lives again through these stories, these images, and these voices. Thank you for joining us in History Gets Alive. Until next time, keep remembering, keep reflecting, and don't forget to subscribe our channel.